This is the international news on Atlantic Television Network. That's the headlines. Hysterious may post bail after 10 years in jail. Israel warns Palestinians not to return to northern Gaza. Junta says drones destroyed cargo truck stranded at border. EU to send officers equipment to reinforce. Finnish borders massive landslide kills 3 in Alaska. New government promises tax cuts, more policemen, less bureaucracy. And now to the rest of our stories. Oscar Pistorius could be granted parole on Friday after spending nearly 10 years in prison for murder. It is the latest turn in the story of the W amputee Olympic runner who was one of the world's most admired athletes before he killed his girlfriend by shooting her multiple times through a toilet door at his home. Pistorius, who had his 37th birthday this week, was sent to prison in late 2014 and has been given a second chance at parole in the space of 8 months after he was wrongly ruled ineligible for early release at the first hearing in March. That was due to an error made by an appeals court over when Pistorius' jail sentence officially started and if he had served the required time. He was initially convicted of a culpable homicide, a charge comparable to manslaughter, for killing Reeva Steenkamp in the pre-dawn hours of Valentine's Day 2013. That conviction was overturned and he was convicted of murder after an appeal by prosecutors. They also appealed against an initial sentence of 6 years for murder, and Pistorius was ultimately sentenced to 13 years and 5 months in prison. Serious offenders in South Africa must serve at least half their sentence to be eligible for parole, which Pistorius has done. Pistorius testified at his murder trial that he killed Steenkamp by mistake and thought she was a dangerous intruder hiding in his bathroom in the middle of the night when he fired 4 times through the door with his licensed 9mm pistol. Prosecutors argued that Steenkamp had fled to the toilet cubicle during a late-night argument and Pistorius killed her in a rage. Pistorius was eventually convicted of murder on a legal principle known as dolus eventualis, which means he acted with extreme recklessness and should have known that whoever was behind the door would likely be killed. It is comparable to third-degree murder. Madagascar President Andry Rajoelina was on a course to win re-election Thursday after a vote boycotted by most opposition candidates and as supporters of his party claimed they were promised money in return for backing him. With 85% of ballots counted, Rajoelina has received 59.7% of the votes in last week's election, according to the National Electoral Commission. Such a margin of victory would eliminate the need for a runoff election and give him a third term as the leader of the Indian Ocean island of 28 million. Rajoelina, former DJ and mayor of the capital, Antananarivo, was president of a post-coup provisional government in 2009-14. He was elected president in 2019 and gained a degree of notoriety during the coronavirus pandemic by promoting a herbal drink as a cure for COVID-19. The lead up to the November 16 election was marked by protests against Rajoelina led by opposition candidates. Security forces fired tear gas grenades at demonstrators and 2 opposition candidates sustained minor injuries. Some polling stations were touched ahead of the election, which was delayed for a week because of the trouble. Former President Mark Ravalomanana, who was ousted by Rajoelina in 2009, was one of the 10 opposition candidates who boycotted the election, saying that conditions for a legitimate and fair vote hadn't been met. But here's another the names of other candidates remained on the ballot. People have lined up outside the offices of Rajoelina's TGV party in Antananarivo and other major towns since last week to collect party membership cards, which they claimed would allow them to be paid for their votes. Some said they had been promised about $75 for voting for Rajoelina. TGV has denied promising any money to its supporters. However, party's officials have said the membership cards would give people preferential treatment for any future government handouts of food and other provisions in a country the World Bank says has one of the world's highest poverty rates. The websites of two government ministries in Bahrain briefly became inaccessible Tuesday night after a cyber attack took them down, reportedly over the island kingdom's stance on the ongoing Israel-Hamas war. A statement posted online by a self-described group calling itself Al Tufan or the Flood in Arabic claimed hacking the Foreign Ministry and the Information Affairs Ministry website. Both later became accessible. Another statement included scans of passports for American citizens and a top Russian diplomat in Bahrain that allegedly came from the hack. The statement says the hacks came in retaliation for the abnormal statement issued by the island's Al Khalifa's ruling family without elaborating. Bahrain's Crown Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa opened a summit last week in the kingdom with a call for a swap between Hamas and Israel for the hostages and halt in the bloodshed. A Bahrain government statement sent later Tuesday night to the press acknowledged that of a number of government agency websites have today been the target of malicious cyber attacks. The government of Bahrain has implemented a comprehensive cybersecurity strategy and framework to address such threats, the statement said. Government operations were unaffected by the attacks and work is ongoing to restore access to the targeted websites. In February, the self-described group issued a claim that it had taken down the websites of Bahrain's International Airport, State News Agency, and Chamber of Commerce to mark the 12th anniversary of the Arab Spring uprising in the small Gulf country. The same shadowy self-described group targeted government websites during elections held last year that were boycotted by a banned child opposition group and others. Bahrain reached a diplomatic recognition deal with Israel in 2020 alongside the United Arab Emirates. The island kingdom, home to U.S. Navy Fifth Fleet, has drawn repeated criticism from Iran, its regional arch rival, over that. The militant Hezbollah group fired more than 50 rockets at military posts in northern Israel on Thursday, a day after an Israeli strike on a home in southern Lebanon killed 5 of the group's senior fighters. The waves of rockets sent over the border represented one of the most intense bombardments since Hezbollah started attacking Israeli posts in the country's north at the beginning of the Israel-Hamas war. Hezbollah has said that by heating up its actions on the Israel-Lebanon border, it is easing pressure on the Gaza Strip, where Israel's crushing aerial, ground, and naval offensive has left more than 13,300 Palestinians dead and caused wide destruction in the sealed-off enclave. The war was triggered by an October 7 Hamas attack on southern Israel that left about 1,200 people dead, most of them civilians, and resulted in about 240 hostages getting taken into Gaza. An agreement for a 4-day ceasefire in Gaza and the release of dozens of hostages held by the militants and Palestinians imprisoned by Israel was sent to take place Thursday, but it was later announced in Qatar, which was a main mediator, that the truce would go in effect Friday morning. Hezbollah said in a series of statements released Thursday that the volleys it fired towards Israeli posts included 48 Katyusha rockets that were directed at an Israeli army base in Beit Zitem, about 10 kilometers south of the border. In another attack, Hezbollah said its fighters monitored 4 Israeli soldiers as they took positions inside a house in Mana kibbutz, then fired an anti-tank missile that destroyed the house and killed the soldiers. There was no comment on the claim by Israeli military. Hezbollah released at least 21 statements claiming attacks on Thursday alone, making it a record in one day since the fighting began last month. The group said its fighters also struck Israeli tanks. The Israeli military said Friday it has destroyed stretches of tunnels and a number of tunnel shafts in the area of Shifa Hospital, Gaza's largest. On Wednesday, Israel showed a tunnel and rooms that military officials said were a major Hamas hideout benefit Shifa. Hamas and hospital staff deny Israeli allegations that Shifa was used as a militant command center. On Thursday, Israeli military spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said Israel mapped out Shifa Hospital and plans to destroy all terror infrastructure it has found. Separately, the military said it continued to strike targets throughout the night leading up to a 4-day truce that began Friday morning. It said it completed its operational preparations according to the combat lines of the pause. The Israeli military has warned hundreds of thousands of displaced Palestinians who sought refuge in southern Gaza not to attempt to return to their homes in the northern half of the territory, the focus of Israel's ground offensive. Arabic language leaflet dropped Friday over southern Gaza said that the war had not ended yet and people should remain in place. Returning to the north is prohibited and very dangerous, the leaflet said. Your fate and the fate of your families are in your hands. We have warned you. Despite the warnings, some Palestinians were seen walking north along Gaza's main highway. Israeli military spokesperson Avichai Adre posted on X in Arabic that movement on the highway would only be permitted in one direction, from north to south. Since the early days of the war, triggered by the Hamas attack on southern Israel 7 weeks ago, hundreds of thousands of people have left their homes in the north at the orders of the Israel army. A temporary truce in the Israel-Hamas war took effect early Friday, setting the stage for the exchange of dozens of hostages held by militants in Gaza for Palestinian imprisoning Israel. The halt in fighting began at 7 a.m. local time and it still lasts at least 4 days. During the truce, Gaza's ruling Hamas group pledged to free at least 50 of the about 240 hostages it took and other militants took in their deadly October 7 attack on Israel. In return, Israel is to free 3 Indian prisoners for each released hostage. The releases are to take place in stages over the next 4 days. The truce deal was reached in weeks of intense indirect negotiations with Qatar, the United States, and Egypt serving as mediators. If it holds, it would mark the first significant break in fighting Israel since Israel declared war on Hamas 7 weeks ago. About 1,200 people were killed by Hamas attackers in Israel on October 7th. Israel responded with a massive air and ground offensive that has devastated large swaths of Gaza and killed at least 13,300 Palestinians. International aid groups say they are ready to deliver thousands of truckloads of food, water, and other supplies to besieged Gaza if a temporary ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war takes hold. Some hailed an important first step, but many said Wednesday that a 4-day truce isn't enough to meet overwhelming needs after 7 weeks of fighting have displaced hundreds of thousands of Palestinians now living in miserable conditions. Key details of the accord announced Wednesday remain unclear, including the mechanics of getting more aid into desperate civilians and escorting the first group of Israeli hostages out of Gaza, where they have been held since Hamas' October 7 rampage in Israel. The ceasefire efforts hit a hurdle Wednesday when Israel's National Security Advisor Sachi Hanegbi said in a late-night announcement that the deal would not take effect before Friday, a day later than originally expected. Aid groups say a key ambition is to get help to northern Gaza, which has been largely inaccessible and where nearly all hospitals stopped working during a blistering air and ground offensive by Israeli forces. The entire humanitarian sector is ready to scale up once everything is Gaza, health officials say. The longer lamented bottlenecks, he said, have confounded the delivery of already insufficient aid into Gaza. He said his umbrella group hoped the truce deal would include a faster track of aid shipments. The only route for international humanitarian aid into Gaza since the start of the war has been through the Rafah crossing between Egypt and Gaza. Plane loads of supplies have been flown into the nearby Egyptian city of El Arish, and trucks have queued up near Gaza. Intense Israeli inspections of Gaza-bound trucks and cargo have slowed their entry. Joel Wheeler, executive director of Doctors of the World, the Paris-based relief organization, said a 4-day window was far too short. Even if the aid enters, it will take 3-4 days to deliver to doctors to get it. And the fighting starts again, he said. It is a joke, the total needs of Gaza's 2.3 million people, and want the restoration of access through the Kerem Shalom crossing, the main entry point for commercial goods into Gaza from Israel. It has been shuttered since the conflict began. Welcome back. This is the international news on Atlantic Television Network. Now to the rest of our stories. Myanmar's military-controlled government said that Thursday that almost half of more than 250 cargo trucks stranded by fighting against ethnic minority armed groups near the northeastern border with China have been destroyed in a fire caused by bombs dropped by drones. Major General Zhao Mintun, spokesperson of the ruling military council, said in a statement phoned to state television that trucks parked in a compound near a trade zone in Muse Township caught fire after drones belonging to ethnic armed organizations launched an attack at about 9:45 a.m. on Thursday. The action was one of the most dramatic and in terms of property damage most extent since the self-styled army launched a coordinated offensive in northern Shan state on October 27. The trucks are used to carry goods to and from China. Zhao Mintun said about 120 pressure on the military government in its struggle against the armed pro-democracy forces that are challenging it in other parts of the country where new attacks were carried out after the October 27 offensive. Chinese officials say they did not detect any unusual or novel diseases in the country, the World Health Organization said Thursday, following an official request by the UN Health Agency for information about a potentially worrying spike in respiratory illnesses and cluster of pneumonia in children. WHO cited unspecified media reports on a global infectious disease monitoring service as reporting clusters of undiagnosed reinforcement to Finland to help Finland so far since August, with more than 700 in November alone by the end of Wednesday compared to a few dozen in September and October. They include people from Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Kenya, Morocco and Somalia. Finnish Prime Minister Petteri Orpo, who addressed lawmakers at Parliament on Thursday, called the situation a serious disruption of border security that affects the national security of Finland, whose population is 5.6 million. Finland cannot be influenced, Finland cannot be destabilized, Orpo said with a decisive tone. Russia started this and Russia also can stop it. The Kremlin denies the allegations. On Wednesday, Finnish border guards and soldiers began in both Russia and Ukraine, which has received them as military aid from the United States. Critics say the weapons lay to the ground and harm and kill more civilians than combat. Kherson City is the capital of a region of the same name that is located on the main peninsula from Ukraine in 2014 and uses it for logistics operation and rare supply depot during the current war. Of military significance and lying on the war's long front line, the Kherson region has been a stage for heavy fighting. Ukrainian troops last week reported gaining multiple bridgeheads on the Russian-held eastern side of the river. Before the afternoon attack, Russian forces fired other parts of the province with 8 nighttime artillery barrages, killing a 42-year-old man in his apartment building and wounding another man, the Ukrainian presidential office said. Russian shelling also killed 2 people in the Donetsk region of eastern Ukraine, the office said. It was not possible to independently verify the reports. Long-range Russian shelling that hit civilian areas has been a hallmark of Moscow's 21-month war in Ukraine. At a meeting Wednesday of some 50 countries supporting Ukraine's war effort, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said they were placing extra emphasis on ground-based air defense, with Germany and France leading Europe in effort to furnish equipment. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said in a Telegram post that Ukraine's Sky Shield is getting more powerful literally every month. Meanwhile, Russian state media reported that TV journalist Boris Maksudov died after being wounded in a drone attack that implemented the Hamas October 7 attack on Israel. Germany's domestic intelligence service estimates that Hamas has around 450 members in the country. Their activities range from expressions of sympathy and propaganda activities in financing and fundraising activities to strengthen the organizations abroad. We are continuing our consistent actions against radical Islamists, German Interior Minister Nancy Faeser said. By banning Hamas and Semidon in Germany, we have sent a clear signal that we will not tolerate any glorification or support of Hamas' barbaric terror against Israel. The raids, which mostly took place in Berlin, were meant to enforce the bans and to further investigate the groups, the German Interior Ministry said in a statement. A total of 16 properties were searched by 500 police officers in Berlin and the states of Lower Saxony, North Rhine-Westphalia, and Schleswig-Holstein. In Berlin alone, more than 300 police officers carried out searches at 11 locations in order to seize evidence and assets. 7 searches were related to Hamas and 4 to Samidun. The searches mainly took place at the homes of supporters and the premises of a Palestinian association, Germany news agency reported. Germany has been clamping down on groups supporting anti-Semitism in the wake of the latest Israel-Hamas war. On Tuesday, police raided the homes of 17 people in the southern German state of Bavaria government after he surged to a huge election victory that marked a stunning lurch to the far right for a nation once famed as a beacon of tolerance. The result is sending shockwaves through Europe, where extremist nationalist ideology is putting pressure on democracies that now face the possibility of having to deal with the first far-right prime minister of the Netherlands. It is going to happen that the PVV is in the next cabinet, Wilders said, using the Dutch abbreviation for his Party for Freedom. With nearly all votes counted, Wilders' party was forecast to win 37 seats in the 150-seat lower house of parliament, more than double the 17 parties secured in the last election. Wilders got a standing ovation, cake and sparkling wine when he met his lawmakers at the parliament building Thursday morning. Can you imagine it? 37 seats, he said to cheer his outcome before what is likely to be an arduous process of forming a new governing coalition begins Friday. Although known for his harsh rhetoric, Wilders began quoting other conservative and centrist parties by saying in a victory speech that whatever policies he pushes will be within the law and constitution. His victory appeared based on his campaign to curtail migration, the issue that caused the last governing coalition to quit in July, and tackle problems including the Netherlands' cost of living crisis and housing shortages. In his victory speech, Wilders said he wants to end what he called the asylum tsunami, referring to the migration issue that came to dominate his campaign. The Dutch will be number one again, Wilders said. The people must get their nation back. But to become prime minister of a country for compromise politics, the politician, sometimes called the Dutch Donald Trump, must persuade other party leaders to work with him in a coalition government. France's military is planning to contribute 15,000 soldiers to the massive security operation for next year's Paris Olympics, an army general involved in the preparation said Thursday. The bulk of the military force, nearly 10,000 troops, will be deployed in Paris region, where most Olympic events will be concentrated, said General Christophe Abad, the military governor of Paris, who serves as military advisor to French capital's police chief. Military forces will also be employed for the games as far as 15,000 kilometers away in Tahiti, where Navy vessels will safeguard the venue there for Olympic surfing. In Paris, a temporary military camp for 5,000 troops will be set up in a park in the southeast of the capital, putting the force close to the city's Olympic sites, Abad said. The security operation for the July 26 to August 11 Olympics and Paralympic Games that follow is unprecedented in scale for France. Tens of thousands of police officers and private security staff are also being deployed. New legislation has also allowed the temporary use next year of camera combined with artificial intelligence software to scan for security problems. Critics fear the Olympic security will erode privacy and civil liberties permanently. In the skies, the French military is also planning to deploy Reaper surveillance drones and AWACS airspace monitoring planes, fighter jets, airborne refueling planes, and helicopters 15,000 nationwide will incorporate 7,000 troops already deployed on anti-terrorism patrols at transport hubs and other busy or sensitive sites, including places of worship, Abad said. The military could also be called upon to contribute additional troops if Paris Games organizers fall short in their effort to recruit more private security staff. The military Olympic preparations include training exercises to hone its readiness for potential crisis during the Games. Abad said that during war games this month, he and other officials tested their capabilities for dealing with a terrorist threat, a plane crash, an attack using drones, a severe heat wave, and a chemical spill. Violent clashes broke out in central Dublin on Thursday evening with vehicles touched and riot police attacked after a 5-year-old girl was seriously injured in a knife attack earlier in the day that also saw a woman and 2 other young children hospitalized. Irish police said the girl was receiving emergency medical treatment in a Dublin hospital following the attack outside a school. Soon after that announcement, at least 100 people took to the street, some armed with metal bars and covering their faces. Police said over 400 officers, including many in riot gear, were deployed in Dublin city centre to contain the unrest, which they said was caused by a small group of thugs. A police cordon was also set up around the Irish Parliament building, Leinster House, and officers from the Mounted Support Unit were in a nearby Grafton Street. There were clashes with riot police as some demonstrators let off flares and fireworks, while others grabbed chairs and stools outside bars and restaurants. A number of police vehicles and tram were damaged during the disorder, while a bus and car were also set on fire on the city's O'Connell Bridge. Shop windows were routinely smashed and a Foot Locker store was looted. All public transport in the city, trams and buses, was suspended, and many firms have urged their staff to work from home on Friday. We have a complete lunatic hooligan faction driven by far-right ideology and also then this disruptive tendency engaged in serious violence, said Ireland's top police officer Drew Harris. Police and politicians called for calm and warned against misinformation over the attack early in the day. A crane operator played down tributes paid to him on Thursday after he lifted a man to safety from a burning high-rise building in England. Video from the scene in the town of Reading in southern England showed a man being rescued by a crane cage from the roof of a building under construction as thick plumes of dark smoke and flames billowed around him. A crowd that gathered near the building broke out in applause. The building, said Edwards, who had been working at the site before the blaze broke out. I had only just seen him and someone said, "Can you get the cage on?" So that was it. I got the cage on and got it over to him the best I could, he added. He said he tried to position the cage between the man and the flames, but he was hampered by the wind swirling around there. But I got the cage down and managed to get him in there, he said. More than 50 firefighters arrived at the scene to tackle the blaze, officials said, and another man was also lifted from the building by crane. Both men were taken to a hospital for treatment for smoke inhalation. The fire extinguished later Thursday. Ground search teams returned Thursday to the site of a massive landslide that killed 3 to search for an adult and 2 juveniles who remain missing, officials said. K9 teams plan to search along the waterline by a small boat and will join ground teams in the slide area at multiple areas of interest, said Austin McDaniel, a spokesperson with the Alaska Department of Public Safety. Searchers used heat-sensing drones and a cadaver dog on Wednesday but had no luck. Monday night slide churned up the earth from near the top of the mountain down to the ocean, tearing down a wide swath of evergreen trees and burying a highway in the island of community of Wrangell, about 155 miles south of Juneau. Rescue crew found the body of a girl in an initial search Monday night and the bodies of 2 adults late Tuesday. Around 54 homes are cut off from town by the landslide, and roughly 35 to 45 people have chosen to stay in that area, interim borough manager Mason Vilama said. Boats are being used to provide supplies, including food, fuel, and water, and prescription medications to those residents, given the geography of the island, with the town at the northern point and houses along a 13-mile stretch of paved road. Currently, the ocean is our only access to those residences, he said. Wrangell usually celebrates Thanksgiving with a tree lighting and downtown shopping events, but could replace that with a vigil, he said. In that way, the town can come together physically and recognize the tragedy and loss of life, but also the triumph of a small community that has really come together and been able to pull off some remarkable successes even in the face of all this adversity, Valima said in a phone interview with the press. The state's transportation department said on social media Wednesday that the process of clearing the highway would only begin once search and rescue efforts were complete. There was no immediate timeline for when that portion of the highway would reopen. Saturated soil can give way when gust blows trees on slope, said Barrett Salisbury, a geologist with Alaska Department of Natural Resources. Wrangell is one of the oldest non-Alaska native settlements in the state, founded in 1811 when Russians began trading with Tlingits. According to the state's database of Alaska community, indigenous people long lived in the area before outside contact. Tlingits, Russians, the British, and Americans all accounted for historical influences on Wrangell. You are watching the international news on Atlantic Television Network. We will be back after this break. Welcome back. This is the international news on Atlantic Television Network. Now to the rest of our stories. The FBI has ended its investigation of a ferry car wreck that killed 2 people at a border checkpoint in Niagara Falls after finding no evidence that it was a terror attack, easing a period of high tensions as Americans headed into the Thanksgiving holiday. The FBI's decision late Wednesday came several hours after the vehicle raced through an intersection, hit a median, and was launched through the air before slamming into a line of boots and exploding at the Rainbow Bridge in Niagara Falls. Local police are now handling the case as a traffic investigation. The search of the scene revealed no explosive materials and no terrorism nexus was identified, the FBI's Buffalo office said in a statement. The matter has been turned over to the Niagara Falls Police Department as a traffic investigation. The investigation has been taken over by the Niagara Falls Police Department Crash Management Unit, according to a news release from the city's police department, which added, due to the complexity of the incident, the investigation will take some time to complete. The two people who died were a husband and wife, according to a person briefed on the investigation, who spoke to the press on condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to release information about the people who were killed. New York Governor Kathy Hochul said the driver was a Western New York resident, but the identities of those in the car have not been released. The crash prompted the closure of the Rainbow Bridge and 3 other bridges connecting Western New York and Ontario as federal officials swarmed the area, trying to figure out what led to the high-speed wreck. But U.S. President Joe Biden naively said in a statement, Chaudhry joins a growing list of Americans facing professional repercussions for their public comments about the war, the fallout from which has spilled into workplaces and educational institutions everywhere, including in politics, the corporate world, and on college campuses across the country. Chaudhry's Facebook posts since Israel declared war in Gaza in response to the Hamas attack have included images of Palestinian victims and claims that Israel is committing war crimes by indiscriminately attacking civilians, along with calling for a ceasefire and the immediate return of all hostages. She wrote, "This isn't a war, this is genocide." Chaudhry defended her post in an interview with the Washington Post, saying she's using her personal social media account to express support for Palestinians suffering through a growing humanitarian crisis. "I'm not surprised that there is a pushback of my advocacy on Palestinian human rights," Chaudhry told the newspaper. "There is this automatic retaliation or scapegoating of individuals who express any support for Palestinian rights." Brown said he assigned staff to draft value statements about personal communications. The commission must serve as a model for the entire state on how to respond to incidents of hate and bias, he said. The commission is facing its first test. How we respond has deep implications. At least 2 police officers and 3 civilians were shot dead in an ambush in the southern Mexican state of Oaxaca, authorities said Thursday. The ambush took place Wednesday afternoon near a bird sanctuary in the Mixteca region, the latest in an escalating dispute between 2 local towns. Investigative police officers and local officials were visiting the township of San Miguel El Grande to resolve the latest territorial conflict when they were attacked by an armed group. 2 police officers were killed along with 2 local officials and a civilian. 2 more police officers were also injured. In response to the attack, more than 100 members of the military, National Guard, and State Security Office were sent in to reinforce the area Thursday. The office of Osaka's Attorney General has opened an investigation. The local of the town of Llano de Guadalupe have been feuding with San Miguel El Grande, 14 miles south, for months now. In September, 4 people from San Miguel El Grande were kidnapped by residents of Llano de Guadalupe and were released following negotiations with authorities, according to local media reports. Prosecutors said Thursday that 3 journalists and 2 of their relatives have been abducted by armed men in a violence-plagued state in Mexico, which press groups say is one of the most dangerous countries in the world for journalists outside of war zones. The prosecutor's office in southern Guerrero State said all 5 people were abducted between Sunday and Wednesday in Tasco, a colonial town frequented by tourists. 1 journalist was abducted Sunday along with his wife, an adult son, and a husband and wife. A team of journalists were kidnapped Wednesday. The online news site, The Afternoon Chronicle, in the nearby city of Chilpancingo, said its reporter in Taxo, Marco Antonio Toledo, had received threats earlier this year from a drug cartel which ordered him not to publish a story. Toledo had also recently reported on a case of local corruption. The news site called on authorities to find Toledo and said the area has been silenced by the drug cartels. Previously, themselves, the news site reported. The press freedom group Article 19 said Toledo, his wife, and son had been pulled from their home by at least 5 armed individuals on Sunday. They have not been heard from since. The group said the kidnapped journalist couple have been identified as Sylvia Nasa Ice and Alberto Sanchez. They worked for another online news site, Red Siet. That outlet has not yet reported on the abductions. Tasco has been long known for its silver artisanry, colonial architecture and colorful Easter week celebrations, but in recent years the city has become a battleground between drug gangs fighting over the lucrative trade in extorting protection money from local businesses. The violent La Familia Mikukanat cartel and the Lacos gang are reportedly active in turf battles in Taxco, about 110 miles south of Mexico City. It marks one of the largest mass attacks reported in one place in Mexico City since one day in early 2012, when the bodies of 3 news photographers were found dumped in plastic bags in a canal off the Gulf Coast city of Veracruz. Earlier in 1 week in June 2011, 3 journalists were killed or disappeared in the same city. The killings were blamed on the once powerful Zetas drug cartel. Last week, a photographer for a newspaper in the Mexican border city of Ciudad Juarez was found shot to death in his car. His death was the 5th instance of a journalist being killed in Mexico so far in 2023. In the past 5 years alone, the Committee to Protect Journalists documented the killings of at least 54 journalists in Mexico. Thousands of people, led by Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel, marched along Havana's iconic boardwalk Thursday in a show of solidarity. Palestinian scarf Diaz-Canel was accompanied by Cuba's main leaders, including Prime Minister Manuel Marrero and Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez. The marchers walked for 2 kilometers, passing in front of the U.S. Embassy. Palestinian medical students who were in Cuba as part of a cooperation program joined the rally. Today, we are supporting the Palestinian people, supporting all those people who feel the pain of having lost a family member or loved one due to this massacre, said Yanko Cardoso, a physical culture specialist who participated. We are asking for a ceasefire and for Palestine to be free. Many young people had posters with the phrase "Free Palestine" with crude photographs of children injured by bombs or flags identifying both Cubans and Palestinians. This march means a lot to us, said Sami Sabala, a 26-year-old Palestinian medical student in Havana. It raises feelings and it makes people feel that Palestine is not alone. The war started October 7 when Hamas militants entered southern